You can barely see it.
My dirt.
Okay, mic check, 1, 2. Mic check, 1, 2. All right. Who can give me one for Nikita Khrushchev? What'd you put?
He was the leader of the Soviet Union.
Thank you. What's the difference between the Soviet Union and Russia?
They are, one is democratic while the other is communist.
Thank you. The Soviet Union exists today?
Yes.
No.
I mean, no.
Thank you. What's something they had in common?
They were both involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Thank you. What's something they had in common? They were both superpowers. There you go, the two superpowers. What else? There's a good one. Both had nuclear missiles. There you go. Anybody else?
They were involved, influential leaders of the movement.
Influential leaders. Okay. What about something just for Kennedy?
He was democratic.
What else?
Youngest president.
Right.
Nikita was whatever. He was known for the desalination.
Desalinization. She's right. Desalinization. I'm going to explain that. Very good. Yeah. Well, hold on. Shh. What? Very good. What? Go ahead.
He came from a working class.
Yeah. Where'd you get that from?
I don't even have it down.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. Yeah, Nikita. Very good. Very good. Kennedy's dad's the richest guy in America. I'll get into that. But hey, listen. Who said, as a little caveat, just in case, it's probably not that big of a deal, but who said he was the youngest president? Okay, here's a caveat to that. He's the youngest president ever elected. He was 43 years old. Teddy Roosevelt, remember Roosevelt? Remember when McKinley gets shot? The Trust Buster, very good. Roosevelt was 42 when he became president, technically. Teddy Roosevelt's the youngest president ever at 42. Kennedy's the youngest elected president at 43. So he won an election. Roosevelt didn't win an election. Remember when they shot McKinley? That's when he was so, just side note. Okay. All right. So we left off. Now, Che Guevara, I could spend a week on Che Guevara. He's fascinating. One of the best biographies I ever read. But we got the basics down. If you're interested in Che Guevara, let me know. I got a bunch of good stuff on him. All right. So here's the problem. If you remember from last time, Castro, Che Guevara, Raul Castro take over Cuba in 1959. They nationalize everything. What does that mean? In communism, there is no private. What does it mean?
Government owns it.
Thank you. The government owns it. So let's look at all the people who are mad at Kennedy. Now, I don't want to get into the conspiracy theories because that's a whole different thing. That's not on the AP exam. It is interesting, but here's all the people that get mad at Kennedy. You ready? Write this down. You ready? When the Bay of Pigs is over, I'm going to explain to you what happens. Here's all the people that get mad at Kennedy. The U.S. military. Write that down. They're mad at Kennedy. Yeah, they're going to get mad. They're going to be very angry with President Kennedy. U.S. business interests, corporations are going to be upset. The mob, the mafia, is going to be upset, right? Now, I can't say 100% is true, but I had dinner with a guy. When he left, my buddy goes, his grandfather put the hit on Kennedy. But that's a different story for a different time. But the mob is upset with Kennedy after this too. And the military and corporations. Who's more powerful than that? The American military, the mafia, and the corporations? You know what I mean? So you got the money and the power. You couldn't have worse enemies than that. I'm going to explain why. But when he out of the Bay of Pigs, all of those three institutions are going to be furious at President Kennedy. All right, so here's the plan. When Castro takes over Cuba, Dwight Eisenhower is the president. Please make sure it's in your notes. People think Kennedy was the president when this first went down. He's not. Kennedy wins the 1960 election. Dwight Eisenhower, he was a World War II general, war hero. His vice president was Richard Nixon. His vice president, Richard Nixon, is going to go up against Kennedy in the 1960 election.
Please, President, interruption. Can you please send Deanna Hernandez to the main office?
Yep. Are you going home? Okay, I'll send you. Could you just do me a favor if I forget? Just tell me to send you the video. Okay? Yeah. Just do me a favor. So when you watch it, take notes at home and then turn in your notes with your do now. Yeah. All right, listen up. Shh. Pretty much. Shh. Shh, 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 shh. So Nixon gets the idea to get rid of Castro. Here's the problem. This is the Cold War. Think about what we said with the Cold War. Everybody knows little tiny Cuba, if the United States sends the Air Force to bomb the heck out of it, and then sends the Navy and an amphibious assault D-Day style, some Navy SEALs, and then sends the Marines, we could take over Cuba in one day. Shouldn't be a big deal. Why doesn't President Eisenhower and Nixon want to do that? How come they can't do that? A little louder? Because of nukes? All right.
No. Pay attention to that.
Okay, send it to me. I'm in the middle of doing something.
This is gonna the rest of the week.
Okay, send it to me. Did you notice I'm in the middle of a class? Can we call security on him? He does this to me every day.
Is this true?
I don't know. I'm kind of busy doing my job.
Have they do it?
Nothing. It's no big deal. It's just do it. All right. It's just do it being do. All right. So why can't we just invade Cuba?
World War III.
Because we feel bad.
Right. Ready? This is a constant theme. We can't allow the Cold War to become a hot war. We can't allow the Cold War to become a hot war because now it's World War III. So the same thing with like Korea, same thing with Vietnam, same thing with Cuba. We can't have the United States officially invade a communist country because the Soviet Union will have to retaliate. That's World War III. So the United States government has to make this look like Cubans versus Cubans. Now, we can't have a direct conflict between United States military and Soviet military because you're talking World War III. You understand? This is important because Kennedy's decision is going to be influenced by this fact. If the United States, this is the entire Cold War, if we have direct conflict with the Soviet Union, World War III, everybody dies. What do you call that?
MAD.
What's MAD stand for?
Mutually assured.
Very good. Mutually assured destruction, right? So we can't have that. So this is a strange thing. You got to win a fight without fighting. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, it's okay. I'm going to explain it. So they get this idea, and this is what's not in your high school textbooks. Does anybody know the first idea the U.S. government had to remove Castro? We got to get Castro out of there because the American corporations are mad. Shell Oil, multi-billion-dollar company. Castro took over all their oil refineries in Cuba. They want them back. That's theirs. They're saying this is theft, right? A capitalist says communism is thievery, right? So the first thing they do, which is not in your high school textbooks or your AP textbooks, they just put a hit on them. They called the mob. So then when Kennedy wins, Robert Kennedy, who's trying to get rid of the mob in a secret deal, they just put a hit on him. So they literally called the mafia and they have somebody take out Castro. This is what's not in your history books, at least your high school history books. So this guy, Sam Giancana, at that time, he was like the real life Tony Soprano or a Michael Corleone. If you never saw The Sopranos, he's a big mafia boss.
The big round.
See this guy? Yeah, he's a big mafia boss. They put a hit on him. They're like, instead of an invasion, because we don't want to start World War III, the United States government, your Attorney General Robert Kennedy, they're supposed to be stopping the mafia. They actually have a sit down and they hire the mob. And they hire the mob to whack Castro. They actually had a maid that had some poison to kill him, but she chickened out because she didn't see a way out. They're going to know it was me and they're going to kill me. But they had a maid, one of Castro's maids was set up by the CIA and given poison to kill him, but she chickened out. So the hit did not work. Now, side note, everybody look at the screen. I'm not telling you this just to be TMZ. It's going to come into play big time. And what people didn't realize at the time. See this guy, Sam Giancana? So he's married, but he had a girlfriend on the side. Her name was Judith Campbell. See her right there? Guess who else was dating Judith Campbell? JFK. So J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, he was known for shaking people down. He tells his brother, because JFK was a huge womanizer. So was his dad. All the Kennedys were. So he goes, you better tell your brother to knock it off with that girl. And he's like, well, can you narrow it down a bit? You know, which girl? Judith Campbell. Because if the mob finds out, if Sam Giancana finds out JFK is seeing his girlfriend, even though both these guys are married, but that's beside the point. This could be a national crisis. Good question. JFK's nickname is Jack. So if you hear me say Jack, his friends and family called him Jack, even though it's John F. Kennedy. So it was kind of interchangeable. This is going to come into play, believe it or not. So if I was giving you the full 12-hour college lecture, which we don't have time for, does a president's personal life come into play? Does it matter? Their ability to do their job, right? Some people say yes, some people say no. Even the people that say no, once I finish the story, it's pretty hard to say, you know what? It really did come into play here. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that's not in your books. Fidel Castro, Che, his brother Raul have taken over Cuba. It's a communist country. Bless you. Richard Nixon, the vice president, comes up with this plan. Once the hit doesn't work, they come up with a plan to invade Cuba, but they're not going to do what everybody thought they were going to do. Havana, right here. So here's Florida. Everybody thought they're going to come into Havana, right? They get an idea, like a surprise attack, go around Cuba and come into the Bay of Pigs. There should be nobody there. It'll be easy. What they think, and this never works, they thought the same thing with Iraq in the 90s. They thought the Cuban people are going to uprise and help get rid of Castro, right? So they were counting on people in Cuba helping them. So what the CIA does is they train Cuban expats. When Castro came into power, he got rid of people that didn't support him. He exiled them out of the country. They were in South America. So the CIA is training these anti-Castro Cubans who are exiled in South America. Does that make sense? Okay. So why is the CIA training ex-Cubans? Why don't we just send the Marines? It cannot be an official U.S. invasion. You with me? Now, here's the thing. Everybody knows the U.S. is training these guys. A bunch of Cubans that got kicked out of Cuba, where did they get $1 million fighter jet? Where did they get all this equipment? Everybody knows the U.S. is backing them, funding them, training them, right? Everybody knows it. But you just can't have an official U.S. invasion or you're going to trigger World War III. As long as it's anti-Castro Cubans that are invading, it should be a Cuban issue. Does that make sense? As long as the United States makes it look like Cuban versus Cuban, we're not in danger of starting World War III, right? This is the pressure that Kennedy's under. Well, what happens in 1960, you have a very close election. Most people will tell you Nixon actually won that election. The other thing that's not in your books, your high school books anyway, on election night, Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, the richest man in America at the time, made a lot of his money with the mob bootlegging when alcohol was illegal during Prohibition. He calls Mayor Daley. Anybody hear of Mayor Daley in Chicago? That's why Chicago has a huge mob history. His son would be mayor later. Chicago politics and the mob have been tied together for decades. His dad calls Mayor Daley in Chicago. Mayor Daley asked Joe Kennedy, do you want me to do it or not? And Jack's sitting there sweating. He's only 43 years old. He's nervous about this whole thing. And Joe Kennedy put his hand over the phone. He goes, Jack, do you want this or not? That was the power of Joe Kennedy. He could make his son president or not with that phone call. So Jack just nodded his head. Joe Kennedy told Mayor Daley to do it. They rigged the votes in Chicago, and the whole state of Illinois went to Kennedy, and he won. A lot of people said Nixon should have protested. Do you know how Trump wouldn't concede? In 2000 was a very close election. We didn't know who won for days. It went to the Supreme Court. Bush versus Gore. You guys weren't born yet. Bush versus Gore. We didn't know who won for, I don't know, it's like 10 days or something. It went to the Supreme Court. But back then, it was a little more honorable. Nixon didn't want to protest it because it would make the American system look flawed, if that makes sense. So Nixon let it go. So Kennedy walks in, he's president. He's new, he's young. The military guys already hate him. You know why? Because he's Joe Kennedy's spoiled brat son. Everybody heard the story about Chicago. It's not in the newspapers, but everybody in the know said, you're here because your dad's got connections with the mob and your dad rigged it. So they already resent him. He gets there with his new frontier, his new cabinet. He actually grabs a guy to be Secretary of Defense. Does anybody know who he was? He was right down the street on Michigan Avenue. Robert McNamara was running Ford Motor Company. You guys know where the glass house is on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn? Like if you're driving to Fairlane, the big glass building on the right, Ford's got all the flags. As Robert McNamara is running Ford Motor Company, President Kennedy calls him, wants to be Secretary of Defense. And he says yes, and he comes in. It's all these young guys. So the military guys don't like any of these young punks. They think like they're elitist, a bunch of rich kids. They don't deserve where they're at, you know, because the President of the United States, you get your highest ranking general, the president's his boss, even though the president doesn't have his record in the military, right? So Kennedy did serve. He was a war hero, kind of. I don't have time for that story, but he did serve. But going into Cuba with these ex-Cubans sounds like this idea should work. It's supposed to be pretty easy. The military guys say, Mr. President, now this is key, you ready? And this is a good life lesson. History isn't just memorizing facts and dates. You can learn from other people's mistakes, and you can learn how people do things the right way and the wrong way. So make sure this is in your notes. They need, shut it off.
Okay.
They need the president to approve air support by the U.S. Air Force if things go wrong. If things go wrong. What they're telling President Kennedy is, listen, because this was really Eisenhower and Nixon's baby, right? It's their idea. They just end up leaving office in 1960 and Kennedy comes in. They're kind of telling Kennedy that they're going to do this. They're not asking him, they're kind of telling him. But they said, we just need your signature that if things go sideways, you'll provide air support. But don't worry, Mr. President, this thing's a wrap. We got this. The people from Cuba are going to rise up and help us. We won't need the air support. This is just a technicality. So these guys feel better about it. They know we got their back. Does that make sense? So Kennedy he just says, okay, because he was kind of bullied into it, kind of intimidated. Once the generals leave, he's talking to his brother, Bobby Kennedy, who's the Attorney General. And he says, this thing going to be okay, man? It's making me nervous. He's like, no, I know. I think we got it. You know, we'll see how it goes down. So here's kind of something that goes wrong. This is not in your history books. They're going to have these ex-Cubans go in there and surprise them. The idea is that going to the Bay of Pigs is going to be a surprise. Most of the troops are in Havana, right? But a couple of things happen. Now, this is before social media. Nowadays, with social media, there's no such thing as a secret, right? I could opening day, if I would have fell down the stairs or something and somebody filmed it, my cousins in Malta could see it 5 seconds later, right? Now, this is back in 1960. It was a little more difficult, but it still happened. A Cuban, anti-Castro Cuban, that was going to be in the invasion, he's at a bar. brag, men start drinking, they like to run their mouth, right? And brag. He's bragging to the bartender, I'm going to be one of the guys that takes out Castro. Well, the bartender was pro-Castro. And that bartender makes a call. That guy makes a call. Next thing you know, Fidel Castro is getting all these secondhand intel about, man, there's something cooking here. They're not coming to Havana. We keep hearing there was a maid at a Hilton that overheard U.S. CIA agents. She was cleaning her room, and these CIA agents were talking about Bay of Pigs. She was pro-Castro. She made a call. So Castro keeps getting these calls, a maid, a cop, a bartender. Hey, man, we're hearing rumblings, and maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but it's really weird. They're all saying that this invasion is going to come to the Bay of Pigs, not Havana. Castro is convinced, you know what? There is no way all these different people from all these different places could all make up the same story. He goes, there's something to this. So Castro moves his troops, the majority of his troops, to the Bay of Pigs. The other thing, when the CIA trained these guys, they gave them maps. The maps were wrong. They were way off. When these guys land, these ex-Cubans that got taken out by Castro, kicked out of the country, they're supposed to hide in these mountains. When they land, those mountains that were supposed to be right there, they're actually about 14 miles away. So there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to take shelter, take cover. So when they come in the Bay of Pigs, these ex-Cubans, anti-Castro Cubans, are shocked at how much fire they're taking on. They're like, holy crap. They're like, this is not a surprise. They're waiting on us. We have the full strength of the Cuban army shooting at us. We're in big trouble. So the plan was take cover in the mountains. Well, guess what? The maps were off. And when I say maps, you guys may think it's weird, but again, there's no Google, right? There's no Google. You're not sleeping. It's their paper physical maps. They were off. So these guys, they're taking on all this enemy fire. So the plan was, if it goes sideways, because they thought they were just going to walk in, because it was a surprise, right? They didn't think there's going to be any troops there. Maybe a handful, nothing big. They thought they could just walk in. So the plan B was, if there's a lot of enemy fire, just hide in the mountains and we'll bring you some backup. Well, the frickin' mountains are like 14 miles away. So now what? What was plan C? The air support. You with me? So everything is sideways. This plan went down the tubes. They are calling on the radio, we need air support now or we're dead. The military generals run in to see President Kennedy. They go, President Kennedy, we've had some issues with the invasion. They knew we were coming. This is not the cakewalk we thought it was going to be. Unfortunately, we need air support. Now, Kennedy already agreed to this, right? He already agreed to it. This is key. Make sure everybody writes this down, because this is also key with the Cuban Missile Crisis. When I get towards the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, this moment is going to come into play. There's a direct connection. When they say, Mr. Kennedy, we're going to send the air support that you signed off on. We just need you to give us the go-ahead. And he says, no, I'm not doing it. Now they're in a room screaming at each other. One general, they really thought he was going to knock Kennedy out. Like, they're ready to fight. They're so furious. Because we had a deal, you made a commitment. Can somebody tell me, why did Kennedy say no? Without me telling you. Why do you think he said no when he originally said yes? Why did he back out?
Because it's of like the U.S. Report, Soviet Union would have been involved.
Exactly. You guys hear what Barbara said? Kennedy doesn't want to send these fighter jets, even though they put Cuban flags on it. Everybody's going to know these guys don't have $100 million to buy these planes, right? Everybody's going to know they're American planes. It's going to start World War III. From Kennedy's perspective, as much as it sucks that Cuba went communist, it ain't worth blowing up half the world, right? So Kennedy says no because of what Barbara said. He doesn't want to start World War III. Does that make sense? Is everybody with me? Now, when he says no, guess who you're going to add to the list? Guess who hates Kennedy? Those anti-Castro Cubans. You have your hand up? You're just stretching. All right. These anti-Castro Cubans that were there, when they were old men, like in the 90s and the 2000s, they were still on the History Channel getting interviewed. They're still cussing out Kennedy. Kennedy been dead since 63. They're still cussing him out because he goes, he sold us out, right? So now they're mad at Kennedy. Kennedy's just trying to avoid World War III. When the air support is shut down by President Kennedy, these guys are dead in the water. They get arrested. Some get killed. Castro wins. This is huge. This makes Castro look like a god to the Cuban people. Because remember we talked about Cuba last week? It was like they were just a toilet for the Americans, right? The mafia is running all these casinos, prostitution, gambling. Cuba was supposed to be like Las Vegas for rich Americans, military, mobsters, athletes. Little tiny Cuba just beat the United States. That's how it looks, right? Castro turns into a god. This is why Castro lasted so long. Remember all the presidents we went through? There's like 10 of them. He's there for like 10 or 11 presidents. That little tiny Cuba could beat the United States. Nikita Khrushchev and Castro meet. There's a famous picture of them hugging each other. This is a huge win for the Soviet Union. The tiny little communist Cuba. Now, did they really beat the United States? Of course not. Right? It's not like they beat our Marines, our Air Force, our Navy, right? And our Army. They just beat a handful of Cubans. But it looks like they beat the United States. Kennedy looks like an idiot. People are wondering what's going on. This is a huge move, a huge win for the Soviet Union in this chess game of communism versus capitalism. Does that make sense? All right. So that's the Bay of Pigs. Now, Kennedy, what do you got going?
Could I go with my college country?
Oh, yeah. You know that. You had this last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be back.
You okay with everything?
Yeah.
Okay. So now Kennedy has to meet Khrushchev. Please look at this picture. When you're doing your AP exam on your FRQs, they're going to give you at least one document that's a picture or a map or something. The picture is usually very easy for kids to use in the DBQ, or it's impossible. If you know that's Kennedy, if you know that's Khrushchev, then you're good. It's going to be easy. If you're staring at this picture like, who are these two guys? There's nothing else to work with. The College Board doesn't tell you who they are. They're testing you to see if you know who they are. So I'll explain the story. This is the first and only time they ever meet. What can you tell me if, like you can tell by body language, before I even tell you the story? Anything you notice in this picture, just from the way they're sitting, what can it tell you? What can it tell you? What are you doing? No cussing. No. Shh. No. Shh. Don't cuss. Shh. Shh. Shh.
No, because he's clearly being dominated.
Very good. No, he's right. You're right. Just don't cuss. He's like the second or third most popular president of all time. People love Kennedy. Lincoln.
Ronald Reagan.
Reagan was a Hollywood actor. Reagan was extremely popular as well. You'll never see another Ronald Reagan. You know what Ronald Reagan did? You'll never see again, especially in today's political climate. We're so divided as a country. Ronald Reagan won 49 states in 1980.
49? Who did he lose to?
Or was it 84? He only lost one state. I forgot which one. But I'm just saying, 49 states, you'll never see that again. We're so divided. We're not at Reagan yet. Focus on this. All right. So, Barba called it. Very good, Barba. A lot of my college students can't figure that out. That's impressive.
You ever heard about the green light theory?
What?
Where it's like, if there's a picture, and you see that the person who's leaning towards the other person is being dominated.
Very good. Very good.
Except for watching.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
Oh my God. All right, focus. Listen. Let me give you some background, JFK. You ready? Even though he's the youngest president ever elected, he looks great. Handsome guy. Women loved him. He's rich. He looks great. He was in horrible shape as far as his health goes. Yeah, he had serious stomach issues. He hurt his back in an accident when he was in the Navy. I won't get into that story. We don't have time. But a Japanese ship crashes into his ship. He saves 2 guys' lives. He swims to an island, but he took a heavy shot doing it. He has severe back issues. He has a series of different illnesses. He's taking a ton of drugs. He's kind of self-medicating. And there's this new thing that came out. It was illegal at the time without a prescription, but his dad had a lot of money. He starts taking steroids. He's also taking drugs his brother found. In today's language, you would call it speed. It would be an illegal drug. He's jacked up. He is jacked up on painkillers and different types of drugs. He had colitis. He had all these things wrong with him. Even though he looked good, he knew he wasn't going to live long. He wasn't going to be an old man. He had health issues his whole life. When he was a kid, he got read his last rites 2 or 3 times because he was always sick. His dad wasn't even going to have him as president. His oldest brother, Joe, was supposed to be president. His dad was grooming his oldest brother, Joe Jr. But his brother, Joe Jr., his dad was Joe. He had an older brother, Joe. The eldest Kennedy brother, Joe, was killed in World War II. He was flying a plane that had the highest amount of explosives in the history of aviation. And it exploded. How'd you put that together? Very good. Very good. Critical thinking. Critical thinking. You're so smart. So smart. You're welcome.
How did it explode? Like, just someone
I don't know. It exploded in the air. Thing is shot, just exploded. So he goes with Jack, and Jack wins barely, but he's very sick. He's in a lot of pain. But America doesn't know this. Nobody knows this. Because his whole thing is he's young, he's strong, he looks good. Like he always looked tan. Well, what people didn't know, he had something called, Barbara, get on the phone. He had something called Addison's disease. And Addison's disease, one of the side effects, it's kind of a weird side effect, it makes you look tan. They called it, that's why he looks so orange. They called it an Andersonian bronzing. It was a side effect of the disease. Very strange, Addison's disease, very strange disease. So one of the side effects was you look tan. So in this meeting, this is what he would do. He was like a rock star. So JFK had the White House physician, right? Every president has a private physician, doctor, okay? Unbeknownst to the White House physician, he had his own illegal doctor. His nickname was Dr. Feelgood. He used to supply drugs for like the Hollywood elite artist. He would be at Andy Warhol's New York parties, and he could get you anything you want, whatever you want. Amphetamines, what, cocaine, whatever. So Dr. Feelgood would secretly travel with the president, and the only people that knew were the Secret Service agents, and they would give Dr. Feelgood a room right next to the president so we could keep him supplied with all his painkillers, all these drugs he was on to keep going. No. I drank Coke. No. Do you know the original Coca-Cola, they put cocaine in it. That's why they call it Coke. Yeah. The original Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. I stopped it. There must be other reasons. All right, so now, shh, they might have to delete that part out of the video. So,
Oh, you're funny, because I hope that video doesn't have an audio. I hope it's like.
no, the green light's on. It should work.
It means, but
Let me finish. So, what he would do is get jacked up on all his painkillers. They were injecting steroids into him. So when he went into a meeting, when he gave a speech that was on national television, he looked good. Like he had a lot of energy. But like I'm drinking this coffee right now. If I have about 3 or 4 of these to get me through the day, what's going to happen once I get home? I'm going to crash. Do you ever have like a Monster drink or an energy drink? You feel great, but then you crash, right? Yeah, those energy drinks are horrible. People are dying from those things. Don't do those energy drinks. The amount of sugar in there is ridiculous. What? No, it's just iced coffee. Shh, can we stay on focus? Stay on point? Thanks. Stay focused. Thank you. Shh. Okay, listen up. So Kennedy gets his steroid shot. He takes his painkillers. He's jacked up. He's ready for this meeting with Khrushchev. This is important. The 2 most powerful men in the world are going to meet. Here's one thing Kennedy wasn't planning on in this meeting. Khrushchev can talk forever. He doesn't shut up. He can. I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. What a rotten kid. All right. So Khrushchev keeps talking and talking. Kennedy's drugs are wearing off. If you look at the way he's sitting, you can kind of tell he's in pain. His back started killing him because it hurt him to sit in a chair. This is how bad his back pain was. This was just to give you an idea. I can't go too far down this wormhole, but this is great evidence beyond the document or contextualization if you need it. When he would be getting on Air Force One, I don't even know if they had Air Force One back then, but his plane, the president's plane, he would have a suit, look great. He'd wave at the cameras. The second he got on the plane, they actually took seats out. He would strip down to his boxers, lay on his stomach, and they used to have to put ice packs on his back and give him like physical therapy while he was in the air because he had so much back pain. I mean, it was crippling pain. His back was so screwed up. They didn't want the cameras to see because his appeal to most people was how young, and his whole thing was being young and vibrant and like a symbol of strength. So then, as the plane was going to land, they'd put his suit back on him. He would be laying on his stomach in pain with ice packs on his back the whole flight. Then right before they land, he gets up, puts his suit back on, takes some more painkillers, inject him with some more steroids. He gets off the plane. He's got to give a brief news conference, talk to the media, wave at everybody. Then as soon as he got to the hotel, the cameras are off. Bam, more ice packs, more physical therapy. It hurt him just to sit in. He had to have a special rocking chair. The chair that you're sitting in, he wouldn't even be able to sit in it. It hurt his back so bad. That's how much pain he was in. He was in a ton. But make sure nobody knew this at the time. Nobody knew this. So Khrushchev starts to see him sweating, like he could read him. You know what it means to read somebody? This is good to know. How can you tell what's like? You ever play poker? Do you guys know what a tell is?
Yeah, like something that you do, like the way you
Yeah, exactly. There's good videos now. Now with YouTube, I had to read a book on this when I was your age. Now you can just go on YouTube. There's quick videos that explain to you. Oh yeah, FBI agents, lawyers, psychiatrists, judges, cops, they get trained in this. So what does it mean if I'm sitting like this and you're asking me questions?
You think you're the...
It means you gotta go to lunch.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hit pause. Go to lunch. Please hurry back. Hurry up, please. We got a lot to cover. All right, so in this meeting, Kennedy's drugs start wearing off because Khrushchev won't shut up. And Khrushchev sees like tells. They were talking about tells and poker. Like if somebody, Ashley, if you ask me a question and I look down before I answer it, what does that tell you? If somebody looks down before they respond, more than likely they're trying to think of a lie. If they look up before they answer you, more than likely they're trying to recall factual information or at least information they think is factual. Does that make sense? So when someone's about to lie to you, they look down. When someone's about to tell you the truth, they look up. Usually. It's not an exact science. Yeah, so there's little tell. If somebody bites their lower lip before they respond or after, it's a lie. Usually. This is what like psychiatrists look at, judges, lawyers. If your arms are folded like this, like if the cops interview you and your arms are folded and you're sitting back, that means you're trying to hide something. If the cops arrest me, like I got detained once at the Canadian border. This is before the internet. They couldn't see a picture. I got detained for an hour. They asked me if I'd ever been to Texas. I was like, yeah, I was just there last week. And they freaked out and they threw me inside. I didn't know why. There was a Mike Cruz who killed 2 people in San Antonio, Texas a week before. And I fit the description. It was, Hispanic male, black hair, brown eyes, 165. I was 165 pounds back then. 165 pounds. This is like the late 80s, early 90s. I didn't know why I was in there. But they said to name the last 5 U.S. presidents, and I named all of them in order just to be a smart aleck. But the fact that this is where I knew it wasn't you the way you sat down. I go, how does that tell you? Because I sat like this. Everybody look at me. The way I'm sitting, and I didn't know this, that I had nothing. If you're facing the person and you're towards them, this means you're confident in what you're saying, you're being honest, and you want them to know the truth. You're not trying to hide anything.
Or maybe you're just overconfident.
That could be true too, but I'd say most of it, if somebody's sitting like this, the way I'm sitting now, they're probably telling you the truth. They don't have anything to hide. They're not guilty of anything. If somebody's sitting like this with their arms folded, more than likely they're trying to hide something. They're uncomfortable. They don't like being questioned, right? Somebody like this is like, I didn't do it. When you're confident in yourself, you're telling the truth, you sit more. Coughing girl. Is everybody with me? So Kennedy is starting to sweat. He has a look on his face like he's in pain, and he is. His drugs are wearing off. So Khrushchev is looking at him like, there's something wrong with this guy. Like he's not right. There's something really wrong with this guy. He looks like he's in pain or he's high. And he was like high. He was just on prescription meds, And some of them weren't prescription. They were actually illegal. What he's taking is today what we would call speed. So this is like an illegal drug. Yeah. So he's kind of high during this meeting. Khrushchev walks all over him because he looks weak. So at the time, they're thinking Berlin is the hot spot. Remember the Berlin Wall? Yeah. So Kennedy tells Khrushchev, we got to figure out this Berlin thing. He goes, we don't want something to happen and it triggers World War III. And Khrushchev looks at him and goes, so what? Khrushchev looks him dead in the eye and goes, so what? Because he wanted Kennedy to think he was as crazy as Stalin. And he wanted Kennedy to think, I'm ready to go to war, bro. I don't care. But you're just puffing up. He was puffing up. He didn't really want World War III, but he's trying to bully Kennedy because he saw an opportunity to bully Kennedy, right? You with me? Remember that because it's going to come into play later. So he walks away, and when the meeting's over, Khrushchev tells his crew, he says, I feel sorry, or I pity the American people for having such a man as their president. Because, I feel sorry for you. He said Kennedy came across as very weak. He doesn't know it's because his drugs wore off and he's in incredible pain. But there's something wrong with that guy. Like he came across as weak. He could barely sit in a chair. Khrushchev thought he was going to fall out. So Kennedy goes back to his people and he goes, man, he walked all over me. If you do that in your college class, your professor's going to fail you. And I'm going to laugh. Don't open a bag of food in the middle of a lecture.
Do I have a whole pizza box with me? No.
Who has a whole pizza box?
You. Need to eat after.
I don't have it with me right now. I'm getting test questions from this slide. Hint, hint, hint. You will have a lecture exam on JFK, Bay of Pigs, and Cuban Missile Crisis.
Why?
Because that's how college works. What I guarantee you is when you have your big lecture exam, I gave you every answer. I promise you. Every answer on the exam I gave you. Yes. When you go to college, remember this, that 3-hour lecture, instead of looking at it like it's just boring old guy talking, a lecture is somebody giving you the test answers. When you understand that, college gets easier. A lecture is somebody telling you the answers on the test. Write it down. While you do that, I got to take attendance.
Was that Myriam? So?
No, I was looking to see if it was, I didn't remember if I paused it. All right. So, the Cuban Missile Crisis, October 16th, October 28th, 1962. 13 days in October. Bobby Kennedy's book is called 13 Days. They made a movie out of it. It's a pretty good movie, too. 13 Days, just like the book.
Can we watch it?
Maybe, if we finish in time, yeah. I think it is. I think they did a really good job. I think it's Oliver Stone's best film. It's most accurate. All right. So, because of that, the reason I told you about the Vienna meeting, usually you don't learn about that in high school. They skip over it. The reason I told you that is because this gives Khrushchev the confidence to try to do this. He's going to make this move to secretly ship nuclear weapons to Cuba. This is going to change the entire Cold War. If they get all the missiles in Cuba operational that they want to, this could get rid of MAD. MAD, mutually assured destruction, right? This could give the Soviet Union an advantage. If either superpower gains a big advantage, that's bad because they're more likely to start World War III because they think, okay, we're going to take a hit, but they're going to take a bigger hit. We could still survive. They can't. You get what I'm saying? So if the missiles in Cuba become fully operational, the Soviet Union could get the United States to back down on things and both start bullying them, right? If the Soviet Union gets an advantage, they can bully us. You get what I'm saying? Hey, man, I got all these missiles in Cuba. I can take out all of your major cities before you have time to react. We could actually win World War III. You're at a disadvantage. Does that make sense? You get what I'm saying? So he starts sending these missiles in to Cuba, and President Kennedy is shown pictures from a U-2 spy plane. We didn't have Google Earth back then.
What is that?
So the U-2 spy plane takes pictures of these missiles. See how big the Soviet Union is at the time? Look how big that is. You're over here in Asia, all the way, it goes from Asia to Europe, 1/6 of planet Earth in square miles. Now here's Nikita Khrushchev. Please look at the photo so you can identify him on an FRQ. The one on the left is the one I was telling you about where he hugs Castro after the Bay of Pigs. I just explained it.
It's because you made it too long.
Let me explain. Soviet Union is like a time when Russia became communist. So when Soviet Union is like became nothing, it went back into Russia, which is now democratic.
Oh, so Russia's Democrat.
Now it is. At the time, it's communism. Yeah.
So he said that.
All right, please write this basic info on Nikita Khrushchev. Go. Write this basic info. I should pause the video. This video's gonna be long.
Yeah, bro.
This is the photo from the U-2 spy plane that they showed President Kennedy. He said it looked like a football field. He couldn't really tell. They had to zoom in. The U-2 spy plane is just a plane with cameras on it. Now, if you had Google Earth back then, you wouldn't need these U-2 spy planes. They didn't have that. So the plane. Well, I could go on Google Earth and look at Cuba.
But it's a photo taken prior.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying if it's recent enough, then nowadays the United States government has satellites. They can get a live shot of anywhere in the world. Watch your language. We're making a. Can you please not cuss?
What about private airspace? Like Area 51, like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't show it.
You could.
Yeah, but like, they don't show it.
Or they could block it out.
Yeah, I'm saying. I
Yeah.
don't want to mess with the government.
Yeah. All right, guys, listen. Shh. Excuse me. Pay attention. So Kennedy sees this. What are you going to do? They're building the launching pads. Have this in your notes. This is crucial to understand. The launching pads for the nuclear missiles are not ready yet. They're still building them. So there's still time to act. You too.
What'd you say? Launching?
The launching pads to launch the missiles, they're not functional yet. They're not operational yet. They're still building them. So we caught it in time to do something. Yeah. Make sure it's in your notes. This is important. They still have time to do something. The missiles are in Cuba. The launching pads are in Cuba, but they're not operational yet. So the United States needs to act quickly. What are they going to do? This is where there's going to be a ton of disagreement, and this is where it goes down, and this is where we're getting more towards, who shot JFK? It could be the government, it could be the mob, it could be American corporations, it could be the U.S. military. All these groups were super upset with him about the Bay of Pigs and the decisions he's going to make here. So there's a meeting already in the books before they knew about this. The Attorney General is Bobby Kennedy, JFK's younger brother. He will also run for president. He will be assassinated. He will be assassinated. A guy named Sirhan. Sirhan's going to shoot him in the back of the head. Bobby warns Dobrynin. He's meeting the Soviet ambassador. He goes, hey, man, we're just letting you know that under no circumstances would the United States tolerate missiles in Cuba. We've had some unofficial reports that there's some construction going on. And JFK, he doesn't go to the next meeting because he wants people to speak freely. And the Soviet Union denies this is happening. So, okay, they're going to lie right to our face. Okay, we got to come up with something. The U.S. military, this is not on the screen, so please write this down. This is crucial. The U.S. military, the top generals, they tell President Kennedy, and they're upset, and they're like, we must invade Cuba right now. No more Bay of Pigs, no more anti-Castro Cubans, no more sugarcoating it. We're talking about a full, official U.S. invasion. This changes everything. We're not going to pretend it's somebody else. We're going to go with the U.S. Air Force. We're going to bomb them into oblivion. We're going to send Navy SEALs. Then we're going to send the Navy. Then we're going to send the Marines. And we're going to destroy the Castro regime in Cuba. We're going to, like a crew, his team. We're going to take them out officially. What do you think Kennedy said to that?
No.
Why did he say no?
Because he didn't want to.
Exactly. Very good, Daniela. Very good. You tricked me.
And Colin Campbell too.
Coughing girl. We have a souvenir for you. All right. Because I know everybody's going to rewatch this video tonight at home, right? Just so you make sure you got everything. Yep.
It's approximately at the 58-minute mark.
Okay, this is
You talk too much.
the part where you sit down. All right, so sit down.
You really think you're supposed to know what's
They asked me to do it. What do you want from me? All right, so shh. Kennedy doesn't want to follow protocol. You just answered the question you just asked. That's amazing. You are the first student I've ever had that answered a question that they already asked. And they answered. You asked a question, you already answered. That's amazing. That's amazing. It's not a compliment. All right, so, so the military is like, we have to invade now. That's the protocol. Most U.S. presidents, I don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, and what psychiatrists say, most men would have invaded Cuba at this point. Most presidents would have invaded Cuba at this point. Kennedy thinks outside the box. Even people that don't like the Kennedys, he was a Democrat, even Republicans that don't like him, they say for this 13 days, he was brilliant. If he didn't think outside the box, and what made him think outside the box? Put this in your notes. He was a lifetime reader. He read books. Why do you read books? This is why. When you read books, you know more than people that don't read books. So he knew more than the people he was dealing with. He learned from a book he read on World War I, Guns of August, how to handle the situation. If Kennedy wasn't a reader, if John F. Kennedy didn't love reading books, there's a really good chance none of us would be here right now. Because if he would have done what the protocol said, if he would have done what most presidents would have done, and what psychiatrists say most men would have done, it would have triggered World War III. 40 years later, we're going to find in Cuban archives, it's going to leak on the internet, that the Cubans had nuclear-tipped rocket launchers waiting for the U.S. invasion. Nobody knew that back then. So even if we would have had an amphibious assault, those guys would have been vaporized. As time goes on, as the years go on, Kennedy looks smarter and smarter. Why do you keep crinkling that up, Garza? You're doing it on purpose. Why do you keep making all that noise? Stop. Stop.
I need to fidget.
You fidget silently. You're killing my soul. You're killing my soul. All right. Shh. All right. So, President Kennedy takes this idea. Some say it's from Robert McNamara. Some say Bobby came up with it. It depends what book you read. But here's the idea. We don't want to start World War III over Cuba, but we can't just keep letting Cuba get nuclear missiles from Russia, from the Soviet Union. So we need like an in-between here. We need some kind of compromise. So what they call for is a naval blockade. Make sure it's in your notes. A naval blockade is what we call for. We're going to put a blockade in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean to stop Soviet ships from getting into Cuba. All ships. Now, because Cuba's communist, because Castro's friends with Khrushchev, Cuba is like Khrushchev's and the Soviet Union. It's like their little brother. They got to take care of them. They're sending them food. They're sending them all kinds of supplies. The blockade is saying, you can still send them food. You can still send them basic supplies. You're not sending any more nuclear missiles. Everybody with me? That's not happening. Now, the critics say, the war generals say, we would be closing the door after the horse left the barn. What's the point? If the door is to keep the horse in the barn, once the horse escapes, what's the point of closing the door, right? Well, this is going to keep any more missiles from coming in. But the military generals are cussing Kennedy up and down. What about the missiles that are already there? This heat between the military generals and the Kennedys gets so bad that there is a real sense that they're going to actually have a fist fight if they're in the same room together, or there could be a military coup, which has never happened in the United States. Do you know what a military coup is? Very good. Where the military forcibly removes the president or whatever the leader's called, and the military takes over the country. There was actual talk of this, and there was a fear of this. That's how bad the heat was between the U.S. military generals and President Kennedy. This is a major contributor to all the conspiracy theories as why he was shot, who shot him. Was the government involved? Again, we're not going to get into all that, but this is one of those things of that long list of things that Kennedy did that upset these people with a lot of power. Here's the estimate. If there is a nuclear launch, they estimated 80 million Americans would be dead within minutes. This changes the entire balance of the war, and this changes mutually assured destruction if it becomes operational. So the military advisors, they're screaming at Kennedy, both Kennedys. Listen, there's one good thing happening here. The good thing is this. We caught it before they could launch, right? We have this small window. They can't launch them yet. If we sit here and wait like idiots until it's operational, now what are we going to do? Now they got us. Why wait? If somebody's pointing a gun at you with no bullets, charge them. Why are you going to sit there and give them time to put bullets in the gun? Does that make sense? So what the military guys are saying, it makes sense. It follows protocol. Am I making sense? Does that make sense, Ashley?
I just want to say fight.
All right. So Bobby still doesn't want to do an invasion of Cuba. They don't want to kill innocent Cuban civilians. So now Kennedy has this meeting with the Soviet foreign minister, Gromyko. This meeting was in the books before they found out about these missiles. Some people want Kennedy to cancel the meeting. Like, no, we're gonna do it. Now, here's where Kennedy was smart. He's smart in a lot of times. This is one of the things he does different. One of the things he does outside the box. It's going to come into play later. Please make sure this is in your notes. Barba, pay attention. Now, in this meeting, the U.S. military wants to start screaming at this guy, Gromyko, like, who do you think you are? You guys are going to start World War III. Kennedy's like, we're not going to mention that we know about the missiles. And everyone's like, what? What are you talking about? We're not going to mention it? Like, no, nobody mention it. We're going to play dumb, and let's see what he tells us. Kennedy's not going to show his hand yet. He's going to wait for the right moment. This is not the right moment. This is very smart on Kennedy's part. Because when Kennedy finally decides to let Russia know that we know what they're doing, it's going to be the perfect time, right? So Gromyko comes into the meeting, and Kennedy's kind of mentioning it. Gromyko has the audacity to tell him, oh, we're just shipping agricultural equipment for Cuba, for farmers and grow food. No, there's nothing military. don't worry about it. So Kennedy, in his mind, he's thinking, you are lying right to my face. Kennedy wants to strangle this guy, but he keeps his cool. He plays dumb. He's okay. I'm just letting you know the U.S. would never tolerate that. He's like, okay. So Gromyko cracks a little bit, and he says, well, there's some weapons being shipped, but they're strictly defensive in case you invade. But nothing you got to worry about. So Kennedy can't believe how he's just lying to him. And he just calmly tells him, just so you know, offensive weapons in Cuba will not be tolerated. So now Kennedy is committed to this idea of a blockade. They got to do something. If they don't do anything, his brother Bobby tells him he could get removed from office. You got to do something. Kennedy gets support from other Western countries. People like France and everything are like, hey, the United States would not lie about something like this. You have our support. Because during the Cold War, don't forget, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union is trying to tell everybody they're the good guy, the United States is the bad guy. We're trying to tell everybody the Soviet Union is the bad guy, we're the good guys. The other guy's the aggressor. We just want the world to be prosperous and peaceful. So we're always trying to make the other person look bad.
All right.
So Kennedy writes a letter to Khrushchev, and he tells him to observe the legally established quarantine. They changed the word blockade to quarantine because it looks less aggressive. It says the U.S. doesn't want to fire any Soviet ships. Bobby meets Dobrynin at the Russian embassy, and he said Kennedy felt deceived. And Dobrynin's shocked. He's like, there's no missiles in Cuba. So they're still standing on this denial thing, right? But then he cracks a little bit, and he goes, well, at least as far as I know, that's what Khrushchev told me. So, oh, okay, now you're going to play like you didn't know. Now you're going to say like Khrushchev's keeping it from you. So Dobrynin asked, why didn't you say anything to me about this the last time we met? And Bobby said that Kennedy couldn't tell Gromyko anything he didn't already know. So now Kennedy goes on television to explain what's going on. And he notifies the world of this blockade. The Soviet Union is still officially denying this. Now, here's how the quarantine went. Ships coming in, say the ship's carrying agriculture equipment, tractors and such. The Navy would get on the ship, they look around, as long as it's not military, as long as it's not nuclear weapons, you can go, you can pass. So they're boarding the ship, check it out, let them pass. Anybody here ever go to Canada or come through Mexico? They look at your car, make sure there's no contraband, let you go. It's kind of like that. So there's these two ships coming towards the blockade or quarantine, but this is a little different. There's a nuclear sub in between these two ships. They detected on the radar. They're like, well, what the heck is a nuclear sub doing escorting these two ships if it's just farm equipment? They wouldn't do that. There must be something on these ships that's not supposed to be there. Now it's getting tense. So they're talking about using depth charges to force the sub to the surface.
Wait, who's looking at this?
Soviet Union. There's a nuclear sub escorting these two ships. This is going to almost cause World War III right here. None of us would have been born if this goes down. Everyone's freaking out. They're like, this could cause World War III. We're going to send these depth charges to get that sub out. It's going to let them know, hey, we know you're here. You need to come to the surface or we're going to take you out. If one of those depth charges gets too close to the sub and kills those guys, we're at war. World War III. 80 million Americans dead. It's tense. Everybody's worried. This thing gets so tense, this Cuban Missile Crisis here and a little later. People in the know, people in Washington, D.C., they're calling their families, telling their wife and kids, get in a car and just drive to Canada. Keep driving. Go as far north as you can. Get the hell out of here. That's how bad this got. Now, the general public has an idea what's going on, but they don't realize how close we're getting to World War III. So here comes these two ships towards the blockade with this nuclear sub, and they stop dead in the water. They just stop. So it's a standoff. They're staring at each other. Now here's something that's not in your book. Barba, dude, come on. So here's the second time we almost had World War III. You ready? The order comes down to fire star shells. You guys know what star shells are? Star shells was just kind of like, did you ever see fireworks on the 4th of July? Or if you saw WrestleMania yesterday when the wrestlers come out, the pyro, you know what I mean? Star shells are something they'll shoot over a ship. It's a warning. Say, hey, we know you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. Yeah, kind of like flares. You better stop and let us board and inspect these ships, or we're going to blow you out of the water and we're going to war. So star shells are like a warning. So when the Admiral of the Navy orders to fire the star shells, Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, he's the guy that was down the street here on Michigan Avenue at the Glass House running Ford Motor Company. He doesn't have the Admiral's knowledge, and he doesn't know the language and the lingo of the Navy. He doesn't know what star shells are. All he knows is that the Admiral said, fire the star shells. Robert McNamara loses his mind and goes, cancel that order, cancel that order. And he's screaming. And the Admiral's looking at him like, let me do my job. Get on my way. They're screaming at each other. They're ready to fight each other. So because Robert McNamara is Secretary of Defense, he's the Admiral's boss, even though the Admiral doesn't like this. And they cancel the order. And he looks at him. He goes, Mr. Secretary, those were star shells. They're just flares. They're warning shots. Get out of my way and let me do my job. You don't even know what star shells mean. You're not qualified. Let me handle this. And McNamara looks like an idiot for a minute, but he has a great response. He goes, what if Khrushchev just makes the same mistake I made? What if Khrushchev is told they're firing on the ship with star shells? He considers that an attack, and he orders the nuclear sub to launch. We got World War III, bro. So McNamara makes good points. So it's very stressful. So that almost causes World War III right there. Now, when the ship is coming at us with this nuclear sub, we're ready to fire on this ship. Like, we can't let it pass. So everybody thinks if these guys don't stop, we're at war. We're all dead. Everybody. And the difference between World War III, World War I, you could sit at home and read about it in the newspaper. World War II, you could be at Dooley's having a coney and read about it in the newspaper. This, you're not going to read about soldiers dying in Europe. If this goes down, you're dead. Your family's dead. Dooley's is gone. Western's gone. Detroit's, that was about Dooley's. Everything's leveled, right? Like, everybody dies. It's not just the soldiers that are in war. You get it? Like, this is a much bigger thing. You with me? Everybody dies. So they give an order. They're going to fire on this ship because he ain't stopping. And at the last second, he stops. Here's a problem, though. We don't have cell phones back then. So the line of communication is a chain of communication. It takes a while. The U.S. military is ready to open fire on this ship because he's not stopping. word comes back that, hey, they stopped. Well, the order to open fire went before they got the message that it stopped. Then they're told, hey, he stopped. Cancel the order. So they send that down. They came within seconds of opening fire on that ship. A few seconds later, were the